you're there.
Cauldron bubbles.
Let me know you care.
At Apple Computer, we believe effective teachers are among our most valuable national treasures.
For the way that you inspired him.
Excellent.
For the heart and soul you gave.
As the national sponsor of Thanks to Teachers,
I just want to say thanks.
Apple Computer proudly recognizes our nation's best educators.
Thanks to teachers.
Good morning and welcome to Vision 90's. I'm Jim Buckley, Vice President and General Manager of Central Operations for Apple Computer, and your host for today's special Apple TV broadcast. We're honored to have more than 4,000 school superintendents, principals, teachers, curriculum coordinators, and Apple education consultants joining us live for Vision 90's at 21 downlink sites across the Midwest. From Omaha to Oconomowoc, from Detroit to Des Moines, from Cincinnati to Chicago, and all points in between. We've all come together via the power of television to tackle the tough issues facing education today and Apple Computer's critical role in providing the learning tools and technologies that will shape the future of our education system. The purpose of the Vision 90's meeting is much more than an opportunity for Apple to reaffirm its long-standing commitment to education. It's more than an overview of our future product directions for the K-12 marketplace. And it's more than a discussion of how we're going to prepare our children for the future. The real purpose of Vision 90's is to communicate with you, the education leaders charged with empowering schools and students with the right tools to meet the challenge of change. Many of you have seen Apple's vision of personal computing in our Knowledge Navigator video. Every time I view that presentation, I think of you, because when it really comes down to it, you as educators are the true knowledge navigators. It's Apple's mandate to build the learning tools and technology platforms for education, but it's your mission to chart the course for our children's destiny. So if we're to be truly successful as education partners, we must truly understand the needs and concerns that each of us have in trying to build a better future for education. To help you gain a more thorough understanding of Apple Computer's continued commitment to its #1 strategic market, we've invited our Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, John Sculley, to share his perspective on our vision and goals for the 1990 and the critical role our partnership plays in preparing our teachers and our children for the challenges of an information-based society. To set the stage for John's presentation, I'd like to show you a brief message featuring John that was produced for Apple's Thanks to Teachers program, a nationwide teacher recognition initiative sponsored by Apple, the Foundation for the Improvement of Education, the National Alliance for Business, and Group W Broadcasting. This piece was produced for a nationally televised docudrama called Everyday Heroes, which begins its run in markets across the country and throughout the Midwest over the next 2 weeks. This special program examines the real-life experiences of 4 exceptional teachers from Deer Run, Minnesota, and how they overcame racial prejudice by using interactive multimedia to help students gain a better understanding of individual human rights. Let's take a look at that message right now.
Hello, I'm John Sculley, President of Apple Computer. We have a company philosophy. We want to change the world one person at a time. It's been part of Apple's culture since we began working in partnership with teachers more than 12 years ago. We recognize that changing the world is exactly what society asks teachers to do: to inspire young people to learn, to realize their potential, and to grow into creative and responsible adults who will shape the future. Well, that's an awesome assignment, and we need to listen to teachers to find out how we can help them. This is the motivation behind the Thanks to Teachers campaign, and why Apple is the national sponsor. I invite each of you to think about that special teacher who made a difference in your life, and what you can do to ensure that similar teachers are attracted to and remain in the teaching profession. Effective teachers are among our most valuable national treasures. Let's give them the recognition, respect, and rewards they deserve.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce our own everyday hero, the man who has helped make Apple computers synonymous with education and a true advocate for computer-enhanced learning, the Chairman, CEO, and President of Apple Computer, John Sculley.
Thank you very much, Jim, and good morning to all of you. You know, we're only a few months into the decade of the 1990s, and we're already seeing a shift in the national agenda. In the 1980s, the focus was on deficits, the trade deficit and the budget deficit. In the 1990s, the national agenda is focusing on the environment and on education reform. Education reform goes deep into the roots of Apple. Many of our Apple employees are former educators. Some of us are involved in efforts to help the reform movement, not only in the United States, but across the world in education. In my own case, I have been chairman of the National Center for Education and the Economy. This is building on the work that was done in the 1980s with A Nation at Risk and A Nation Prepared. Our foundation is supported by the Carnegie Corporation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and New York State. Governor Mario Cuomo is the honorary chairman. I'm the active chairman. One of our most important projects is the Rochester School District Reform Project, where we are trying to build a model of how teachers can be motivated through an incentive pay system. Cooperation between the teachers union, the community, education, all of these groups working effectively together. In addition to this, we're working on an agenda today for skills in the American workforce. And last year, I had a chance to meet with President Bush, talk to him about our work, and about the vision we saw for education reform in the decade of the 1990s. The proposal that I brought to President Bush at that time became the agenda that was used by the President and the 50 state governors when they met last September. Education reform is going on outside the United States as well. I've had a chance to visit the Soviet Union, work with leaders over there as well. At the moment, we're trying to help convert the low-altitude defense satellite system in the Soviet Union to be able to connect up their schools via satellites. So information could be shared not only between their own schools, but eventually between American schools and Soviet schools. In addition, I had a chance to install a Macintosh computer in President Gorbachev's office. See, President Gorbachev asked me to become a member of the International Foundation for the Survival and Development of Humanity. We have some major themes. The late Andrei Sakharov was working on human rights. We've been working on the environment. We've been working on arms control. And we've been working on education. I'm chairman of the education committee of this foundation and have enjoyed working with the Soviets, and in fact other members of the academic and technical community around the world who have been part of the foundation. But we need to put all of this into the context of a global economy. You see, in the 1980s, we were in the last years of the industrial age economy model, one where the United States was at the top, where we were able to take resources out of the ground and add our manufacturing know-how to them, build products which we could sell not only to our own large marketplace, but also to others around the world. And this created the affluence of our middle-class society, the lifestyle that we've come to enjoy. But now we're into the global economy, an economy where America is no longer alone at the top, but we are one of a number of strong peer economies, where the strategic resources are no longer just the ones that come out of the ground, like oil and gas and wheat and iron, but they are resources that come out of our minds. They are ideas and information. The real job for education reform is to focus on preparing our young people to be able to deal in that global economic world so that they can add value, so that we can maintain the quality of lifestyle that we've become accustomed to during this century and be able to enjoy that into the next. It means that our young people have got to be able to have the critical reasoning skills, the ability to solve problems, the ability to make judgments. This country, in a matter of a few short years, went from being resource rich when the resources were in the ground to resource poor when the resources were ideas and information. It's the job of educators and all of us in supporting you to help make us resource rich again. Now, you may have heard some confusing messages from many talking about Apple in recent months, messages which I'd like to try to clear up now. Yes, it's true that the Macintosh technology has been extremely successful in higher education. In fact, the Macintosh is the personal computer of choice between students and many of the faculty on campuses around this nation. It's also true that we've seen some erosion in our Apple II sales in high schools with MS-DOS machines moving in. And it's further true that we have been adding a lot of Macintosh promotion activity, not only in higher education, but focusing now into the K-12 market. So some of our competitors have said that we no longer care about the Apple II. They've tried to set up a feeling that there's some doubt amongst those at Apple as to whether Apple is really behind the Apple II. What is our commitment in the future? I'd like to try to clear that up right now. There are between 5 and 6 million Apple IIs in the installed base. There is no computer in the world that has changed education more than the Apple II. It's a proven tool. It's one that you as educators helped shape. It is one that we are firmly committed to in the 1990s. In fact, just this year, we have added more enhancements because the way the Apple II is designed, it's very modular in concept. We're able to add technologies to it to continue to build it, to allow it to grow as technology grows. This year, we added System 5 for the Apple II GS, making it even more powerful system software for this product. We added the SCSI interface for hard drives, meaning that Apple IIes are able to share the same hard drives that we use on Macintosh. And we added video overlay. Video overlay means that the Macintosh 2GS becomes a true multimedia environment. Interactive multimedia, I think, is going to be one of the really key technologies in moving forward the ability for young people to be able to learn more effectively, giving them an environment that makes it interesting for them to accept new ideas and to be able to push back and try things, question, and do it in ways that are natural to them because they grew up with television. They're used to photorealistic images. We can do this with video overlay on the Apple II GS. Another way to look at our commitment is to see where we're spending our research dollars. I can tell you that in this fiscal year, 1990, that we have increased our research and development behind the Apple II by some 20%. So we're not walking away from the Apple II at all, but we recognize that not every technology is right for every situation, that it's important that you have choices. And I'd like to talk about those choices. In the Macintosh family, what you can expect in the school year 1990-1991 are some new products from Apple, products that are going to expand the range, particularly at the low end for Macintosh. We'll still have the same consistency that you've known in the past, but we're going to add new technical capabilities to the Macintosh family. I think this is going to be extremely important for the K-12 market. In addition to having some exciting new products for Macintosh, we're also going to provide you with a bridge so that you can be able to add the Macintosh technology and not obsolete the investment you've already made in Apple II. And let me give you some examples of that. One of the biggest investments that you've made in Apple II technology is the investment you've made in data. This information needs to be able to move to your new platforms as well as to stay with the platforms that you already have. Data compatibility is one of the most important aspects of the Apple strategy. We have the same floppy disk format for the Apple II that we have on the Macintosh. So it is very easy to be able to move information from one platform to the other platform. In addition, with our Macintosh products, it's also possible for them to read MS-DOS technology. No one else can offer you that particular bridge of compatibility of data between Apple II, Macintosh, and ability to read MS-DOS files. Another good example of the bridge is in networking. I think most people who have been following the trends closely realize that networking is going to become even more important in the classroom in the 1990s. We have networking built into every Macintosh. It comes for free with the product. It's also built into major peripherals like a laser writer so they can be shared by Macintoshes. But we've also developed an Apple Talk card that will go into an Apple II. So even the early Apple IIs are able to connect into our latest peripheral devices like a laser writer, and they're able to work on networks with Macintoshes. No one else can offer you that level of networking technology in what we call plug and play. Easy to set up, easy to use. Another good example is what we're doing with printers. Printers are a very substantial investment for most schools. A device you don't want to throw away as you start to look at other technology platforms. The image writer printer and the laser writer printer work with both the Apple II and the Macintosh. Many years ago, we started to recognize the importance of being able to share peripherals between our two product families. And now that's starting to pay off, particularly for education. And then I'd like to mention HyperCard. You know, when we introduced HyperCard, a lot of people didn't understand it. They didn't know what it was going to turn into. At that time, we had about 13,000 applications that had been developed for the Apple II, a large number of them in education. In the first 15 months that HyperCard was on the market, over 235 stack applications were created. The reason why it took us 10 years to get 13,000 applications on the Apple II and 15 months to get 235 stack applications on the Macintosh with HyperCard was because HyperCard was an end-user technology. You didn't have to be a technical programmer in order to use it. Particularly important technology, I believe, in education. We've seen its effect in higher education. We're going to see it being very important, I believe, in K through 12. Well, obviously, as the Macintosh moves into K through 12, HyperCard comes with it. What's also important is that we've been working on HyperCard for the Apple II. We want to be able to have that kind of capability with the Apple II as well as Macintosh. Another way in which our two products can leverage off of each other and be able to work in a mixed environment. So in summary, we have a very deep commitment to education reform, to K through 12. We also have a very strong commitment to two technology families, the Apple II and the Macintosh. Each has their own set of strengths. We want you to be in the position to choose what you feel you need to be able to do. Recognize the solutions that are important in your classrooms, and then know that the technology is going to be supported by Apple, that we can continue to build on that. A good example of that is what we're going to be doing with another future product. And that is that we're going to be building an Apple II emulation card. This is a no-compromise Apple II that will be able to run inside of a future Macintosh product. That means that you'll have a true universal platform in many cases, the ability to run Apple II and Macintosh on the same system. That's just a teaser of some of the important things that we have yet to come in school year 1990-1991. We're committed to being an important supporter to you in education. You're going to make the difference. We want to help you do it, and we think our technology can be a very big partner to your efforts. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. I believe you've helped the educators with us today better understand Apple's future direction and product plans. I'm sure that they'll feel more comfortable with their product planning process, especially the challenge of implementing these technologies in the classroom. We've all found that the shift to new approaches in behavior changing and learning can be painful. It's not something that can be resolved within the four walls of the classroom or during the period of 8 to 3. It has to be a commitment to extend the learning process beyond the lesson plan, beyond the schoolyard, to view education and learning as a lifelong journey. That commitment and dedication to reshaping our educational system philosophy has been fully embraced by our next special guest, Apple Computer's Vice President for Education, Dr. Bernard Gifford. Dr. Gifford has spent his entire professional life improving our educational system as an educator, advocate, administrator, and policymaker. His views on learning and how Apple intends to build and provide the right learning tools to achieve our collective mission is the subject of his presentation today. It's my pleasure to introduce our Vice President of Education, Dr. Bernard Gifford. Bernie, thanks for coming.
Morning, Jim. John was explaining the enormous transition we're going through from the industrial age to the information age, and how this transition requires a new way of thinking about the organization of intellect. At Apple, our vision of education for the information age is best understood within a framework that we call the Learning Society. The Learning Society is a social setting which is dependent on a degree of access to information that was never possible before. In a learning society, learning is a lifelong process where learning is not confined to the school walls and to artificial institutional delineations. Instead, in a learning society, learning takes place at any time, in any place, for any person, on any topic, in any sequence. In this social setting, learning is viewed as a lifelong process, and the concept of exploring ideas will be instilled early in elementary schools, in high schools, and in colleges. But even beyond this, the role of educators will be to prepare young people to educate themselves throughout their lives, to crave learning, and to make the pursuit of knowledge something that does not end at the gates of the schoolyard. Of course, a key ingredient in the creation of a learning society is personal computer-based instructional tools that give individuals access to information ideas. Such a tool must be intuitive, consistent, flexible, extensible, and integrated. It is important to realize that the creation of a true learning society is dynamic and constantly evolving. So what I'd like to do this morning is to share with you some of the programs that are already in place that guarantee that Apple will continue to provide the kind of leadership and access to information that is imperative for lifelong learning in the information age. In the area of research, Apple's Classroom of Tomorrow project, something we call ACOT, has led the way. For example, at the ACOT site in Columbus, Ohio, we are working with teachers and principals to utilize the Macintosh in a cross-disciplinary instructional program at the high school level. Research teams from UCLA, Ohio State, and Cornell University have been working at this site for years and are just beginning to produce astonishing results, teaching all of us how we can use computers to truly develop interdisciplinary studies. In Los Angeles, under the leadership of Apple Fellow Dr. Alan Kay, recently selected by Time magazine as one of the 25 most influential persons for the 21st century, they are working on new software designed to provide to young learners powerful stimulation and modeling tools. There's no doubt in my mind that we are seeing the 21st century created today under the leadership of Alan Kay at the Vivarium. We also do things closer to home, closer to earth, today. Apple's Education Affairs Grants Program is based on the notion that Apple has an obligation to reach out to the education community. This program provides grants of equipment and resources for innovative projects, especially for underserved populations. In Mossady, Minnesota, for example, Project Communicate provides a network linking mainstream special education students with other classmates, closing the gap between handicapped students and their non-handicapped colleagues. In addition, we're working with universities to develop research models that can influence everyday practice in the schools. The Christopher Columbus Consortium, a consortium currently of 20 graduate schools of education, has been funded by Apple to work in close partnerships with school districts throughout the Midwest. Now, as I was describing in the Learning Society, no one should be excluded from the excitement of learning. This is why special education is a key part of our overall mission at Apple. The Alliance for Technology Progress, formerly known as the National Special Education Alliance, is a coalition of nonprofit collaborative organizations seeking to provide people with disabilities easy access to technology. The Computer Resource Center in St. Louis has long been a partner with Apple in this alliance. Of course, we also have relationships with a number of professional organizations. Last year, the National Education Association voted that every teacher ought to have, before the end of the 1990s, a computer on his or her desktop. While we're working closely with NEA to find ways of implementing this program to put powerful technology on every teacher's desktop, technology which will enable each teacher in this country to reduce the administrative and bureaucratic workload that they currently confront. We're working with the American Federation of Teachers to develop a powerful interactive multimedia project on the topic of restructuring. As John indicated in his comments to you, schools will be different in the 21st century than what they are today. How they will be different, how restructuring will impact them is an important topic, and working with the American Federation of Teachers, we are helping them to explain to their members the impact of restructuring. We also work with school board members through our partnership with the National School Boards Association. With them, we are developing a CD-ROM-based tool which will enable them to access immediately rules and regulations dealing with school curriculum, labor contracts, school finance, and educational law. This tool is determined to make a real powerful difference in the ability of school board members and school administrators to have ready access to information. One of the programs that I've been most excited about, and you've seen a little bit of this earlier in the program, is our Teacher Recognition Program. As former Dean of the University of California Graduate School of Education, and as former Deputy Chancellor of the New York City Public Schools, I understand that great schools begin and end with great teachers. This is part of the reason why teacher recognition programs are such a high priority for Apple Computer. One program in particular is the Thanks to Teachers program. This year, this program is being fully supported and implemented and supported at the local level in cities like Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Minneapolis, Detroit, and in Chicago, they are preparing to recognize outstanding teachers from the Chicago metropolitan area at the Golden Apple Awards scheduled for later on next month. Of course, great technology is only part of the answer to the problems we face in education. We also require great solutions to run on top of our wonderful technology platform. That's why we're working with developers to create unique solutions to meet your educational needs. Apple's Multimedia Lab, for example, worked with National Geographic, the state of California, and Lucasfilm, the creators of Star Wars, to create Geographic Television, an interactive multimedia project for the Apple IIgs. Believe me, once you've seen Geographic Television, you'll understand why American history will never again be the same. We also work in active partnerships with integrated learning series vendors to create integrated learning systems which take advantage of the powerful technology of Apple II and Macintosh to stimulate the creative instincts of individual students. Recently, we've begun a partnership with the Norris Institute, based in Minneapolis, to explore new forms of personalized education management systems for individuals, for teachers, and for administrators. These tools will make information more readily available to every member of the education community. Most important, as part of these programs, we seek to create two-way partnerships with school districts at the local and state levels. Partnerships where we work together to improve education, where we work together to learn how technology improves the learning process. These partnerships are at the root of Apple's efforts. We hope to continue to strengthen them throughout the 1990s. We hope to continue to be your partners in improving the schools.
Thanks very much, Bernie. I'm sure that there are a lot of heads nodding in agreement out there when you spoke about the critical need to rethink our ideas about learning and focus on ways in which technology can help us create a true learning society. At this time, I've asked John Scully to rejoin Bernie and me for the question-answer portion of our broadcast. Now, these are not questions that we've conveniently dreamed up ourselves. As many of you know, our Apple education representatives and managers have spent time polling our education partners across the Midwest to find out exactly what was on your minds. Questions like the continued support of the Apple II platform, the future direction of the Macintosh product family, and the implications for planning. Concerns about Apple's commitment to education, Apple's ability to guarantee the availability of a broad base of innovative and effective software, and a host of other issues. Every question reflects the specific concerns that you raised to us and to your local Apple representative. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask John and Bernie to respond to some of the major issues that confront this education partnership. Bernie, let me start with you. Mel Henick from the Milwaukee Public Schools and Marilyn Terry from the Pattonville School System near St. Louis would like to know, what about educational software for the Macintosh? And what is Apple currently doing to address this issue? And are developers still working on Apple II software?
Well, you've asked the question in two parts. First of all, with respect to Macintosh, we're beginning to see a tremendous increase in investment by developers producing software on the Macintosh. For example, before the end of this month, every member of your audience will receive, in a direct mail from Apple, a booklet called Macintosh Educational Software Guide, which contains a description of well over 250 Macintosh educational software packages. Now, we reviewed over 1,000 Macintosh applications. Working with a board of independent educators, we asked them to review these applications and to make sure that they were first-rate programs. They selected over 250 programs, and these programs are described in this booklet, which will be made available to all of our partners and friends across the country. And we expect that over the course of the next year that the rate of investment by developers on the Macintosh platform for K-12 education solutions will increase at a phenomenal rate. By this time next year, I believe I can easily predict that we will have no fewer than 2,000 applications, and I'm sure at least 1,000 of those will receive the same seal of approval that these 250 applications. Interesting enough, Jim, one would think that the Apple II, which has always had a large software base, would be reaching a point where investment by developers would be slowing down. That's not true. Up until 1989, there were over 10,000 Apple II educational software applications. Over 1,000 of those applications were used in over 50% of the schools. Even with that tremendous base of Apple II software applications, since the beginning of 1989, over 900 new applications were developed. And we've put together a new Apple II education software guide which just reviews programs that have been developed over the course of the last year and a half. And many of these are extensions of old favorites. Many of these are brand new rewrites. But all of the applications included in this booklet, I think, clearly demonstrate that there's a heck of a lot of life left in the Apple II platform. It is still generating enormous creativity on the part of developers. We also are beginning to see a tremendous increase in Apple Share Aware educational software. So I think our partners in the field can expect that developers will continue to invest major resources in both the Apple II and in the Macintosh. And as John made clear in his presentation, these are not two separate and distinct developmental tracks. Because of our commitment to extensibility and connectivity, investments made in Apple II will help those school districts that also have Macintosh technology, and the other way around, investments in Macintosh technology will help school districts to capitalize on the investments they've made in the past. So I expect great things to happen over the course of the next year or so.
Well, that's great news, Bernie, because everywhere I go in the Midwest, people want to know about software development, both in the Macintosh and Apple II area, and these are exciting enhancements and announcements. So I'm sure that our audience will be glad to see these catalogs when they actually get mailed out in the next couple of weeks. John, let me shift to you a little bit. And we have teachers from places like Minneapolis and Des Moines and Omaha and all over the Midwest. And they heard what you said about new products. And I guess the question that they have is, with so many choices available today, how do I really know what to buy? They're intrigued by our new products, but they have a limited budget to invest in technology. What would you suggest that these teachers and these administrators do?
Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind, Jim, is that Apple is the only personal computer company that is in both the hardware and the software business. So we're able to optimize the software and the hardware technologies so they work well together. But it also gives us the chance to be able to build our technology so that as we add new features in the future, we have consistency with what has already been done in the past. Nobody else can do that. A good example of that is what we've been doing with the Macintosh system software. As we've added more and more powerful Macintoshes, you can take applications that were developed back in 1984 and run it on those newest, latest Macintoshes. You can also take applications that weren't even dreamed of back in 1984 and run them on our earliest machines. There is a consistency to the architecture of the technology that goes forward. So consistency, I think, is one of the important words to keep in mind. Another one, I think, is the fact that Apple has worked very hard to make our technologies integrate well with each other, whether it's the Apple working with the Macintosh or whether it's peripherals we develop for both families. These things allow the educator the maximum level of choice, so that when you're choosing, you don't have to worry about being locked out of something because of a technology issue. You really then can make your choices based upon the solution needs of your classroom, where you're trying to go with your school, issues that are important to teachers as non-technologists, and have confidence that the technology is going to be there to support you.
I think that the audience will be glad to hear that from your lips to their ears, and I think that that's something they've been looking to hear for a while. As a follow-up to that question, I'd like to ask each of you, we have a constituency out there that relates to a much larger concern, and I was wondering if both of you could respond to this. And the question is, how do I as an educator make long-term commitments when technology is really evolving so rapidly? Bernie, would you like to take a shot at that?
I think, first of all, as one who has been in the same situation that many people in the audience find themselves, is I think you form partnerships with companies that are comfortable with change, that build change into development of their technology, and that operate on the premise that it is extremely important that you bring your partners along with you as you change. One of the philosophies of Apple that attracted me to Apple and that made me an Apple fanatic long before ever joining the company was Apple's uncompromising willingness to see to it that they do not leave technology behind. They do not leave behind those partners that were early investors in Apple technology. So there is this tremendous emphasis on bridging great technology from the recent past with marvelous and unprecedented technology that will be coming in the glorious future. And Apple is a company that takes very, very seriously its responsibility to help its customers go through very changing and dynamic times. So I would say first criteria for selecting a partner is that does your partner take into account the cost of change and try to minimize that change when it introduces new technology. And I believe on those grounds, Apple receives straight A's. We will not abandon those customers that have invested in Apple II technology as we ask them to invest in Macintosh technology so they can take full advantage of more recently developed technology. We continue to invest in the Apple II. We continue to build bridges between Apple II technology and Macintosh. And we continue to be extremely sensitive to the impact of change on investment decisions. We understand change. We're perfect partners for changing times.
Well, Apple is a company that's constantly changing. John, do you have any thoughts you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think Bernie has really said it very well, Jim. I would like to say that I think that companies eventually return to their roots. Our roots didn't begin in business as a business machine company. They really began with education. We wanted to change the world. That was a vision that has led us to where we are today. So it's about relationships. It's about what people believe in. It's about what they really care about. It's about where the passion is. Inside of Apple, you find a lot of deep-rooted passion about education. People care about making a difference. It's reflected by our engineers in what they build into our products. Special education is a good example of that. We do things with our products that may not have much impact in terms of the profits of Apple, but they can have a lot of impact on somebody's life. Those kinds of things are important to us. So you see us sweat the details. We spend a lot of time and attention on the little things because we know that they add up to important things for individuals. It's one of the reasons why the statements Bernie made about the consistency of our technology, not leaving the install base behind, are things that we can say with a lot of honesty because that's in fact what our technology allows us to do. So I really back up what Bernie has said.
My career in Apple started 5 years ago on the education side, and I felt the passion now, and I haven't seen that passion wane by anyone in our organization. I'm proud of that, and I'm glad to see that. John, as I travel across the Midwest, not only education customers, but all flavors of customers, ask me about the extensive media attention we've had over the past couple of months. They ask me questions like, what's really going on at Apple? And can you tell us where Apple's going? I thought since we had you here this morning, you'd be the best person to ask that question. So what's going on at Apple?
Well, Apple is a company that is constantly dealing with change. It's hard to believe that we were in a garage just 13 years ago, and today we are number 55 in the Fortune 500 in terms of profitability. So we've come a long way in the last 13 years. But there are some that would have you believe that Apple's future is shaky, that it's in doubt. and yet our profits are up 30% so far this fiscal year. Our revenue was up 30% for the full last fiscal year, and our revenue is growing well this year as well. In the most recent quarter that we just announced, our profits were up 134%. So we're a strong, healthy company. In fact, we have the strongest balance sheet of any personal computer company in the world. We have the resources to invest in product development. We are doing just that. The real focus for us now, Jim, is to follow our dual platforms of education and business, to be able to have a common platform between both of them from a technology standpoint so that we can bring real distinctiveness to the individual. That's what Apple's all about. It's about focusing on the end user, focusing on the individual, making a difference in productivity for individuals, making a difference in the way people learn. These are the things that make Apple exciting. We get a lot of media attention. So I think that it's sometimes good to sort of set aside the soap opera attention that we get and look at the facts, and the facts are awful strong. This company is healthy, we're doing well, and yes, we can deal with change that's out in the 1990s.
Well, we sure are doing well, and I think it's important that the media sometimes cover the good news as well as the bad news, and I think that the news is pretty positive right now. A few years ago, you were instrumental in putting together a great video. You stimulated the minds and the imaginations of educators and people all over the world with the Knowledge Navigator video. And Lloyd Kleindinks from the Parkway School in St. Louis and John Sonnenberg from Lake Forest Schools in north of Chicago were asking if you could update the educational community on the current research underway in the development of Navigator-like tools. We saw lots of tools there that were somewhat futuristic. And are we likely to see an affordable, simple, notebook-style computer for student desktops soon?
Well, I created the concept of the Knowledge Navigator back in 1987 with the help of Alan Kay. And what I was really looking for was a direction that personal computing could take in the 1990s and out into the 21st century that would lead us beyond the personal computer as a replacement for the word processing machine or a replacement for a machine that could do electronic spreadsheets. And so the Knowledge Navigator recognized that we wanted to have technology that would allow people to navigate through information, to gain knowledge by working interactively with multimedia technologies. It was a vision that we showed in our video for the 21st century. I must be totally honest and tell you that I think we'll have it long before the 21st century. In fact, we're working on all of the key technologies inside of Apple's laboratories for the Knowledge Navigator, and I believe that we will see the first generation Knowledge Navigator during the 1990s, not having to wait maybe 15 years as the video suggested. The kinds of capabilities that we want for schools is to be able to do the ideas of the Knowledge Navigator for the lowest possible cost, and that's going to vary at the time frame that we look at. So today we can't do all the things the Knowledge Navigator does at the price points that are important to education. But the focus of our company now is shifting even more towards the lower end. The focus is to differentiate ourselves with innovation even more towards the lower end. So what you can expect from us in the years ahead is more new innovation for the student, for the teacher, at lower price points that will build on the things that you already know us for with Apple II and Macintosh technology. But you're also going to see some of the neat things that showed up in the Knowledge Navigator video starting to appear in not too far out into the future.
That's pretty exciting. I think we probably have about 4,000 people out there who would volunteer to beta test that product sometime in the 90s. Bernie, let's shift the positioning a little bit. And one of the things that our educators are telling us everywhere, from as far east as Pittsburgh to the Dakotas to Kentucky and Missouri and so on, is that our competition, but most particularly IBM, is spending significant amounts of money on the development of software solutions, networking in the K-12 market. They're making dramatic and significant donations to the schools. I guess my question for you is Apple equally committed to using its resources to help schools in the U.S. use technology?
Not only are we committed, but we have a 10-year record of making significant investments in education. I would say that the one problem that Apple faces in this arena, and it's a very unusual problem for a company like Apple, which seems to be in the newspapers all the time, is that Apple has been unusually modest in talking about its donations to the educational community. For close to a decade now, Apple has been investing in K-12 education in a large way. Through the Apple Classrooms of Tomorrow program, we have made computers available free of charge to a large number of school sites around the country. Many of these school sites are in parts of communities where technology is not normally available because these communities served by large numbers of poor kids who come from poor families. We've made donations to a number of special education alliances because we truly believe that in a learning society, everybody will have an opportunity to use technology to extend their intellect. We have a very active and aggressive and long-standing program of philanthropic investments in education. What we don't do is we don't brag about it, because what we try to do when we make gifts, we don't try to embarrass the recipient of the gifts. What we do is we enter into true partnerships and we try to learn together. If I would have one comment, I would ask that our partners out there just look around them, look in their own school districts, and they will be surprised at the number of schools that have been the recipients of Apple's generosity in the past. Comparing Apple to IBM, I would say we only lag in our volume of announcements about our efforts, but I think a true comparison would show that over the course of the last decade, Apple Computer's investment in education has been far higher than it has been for the competition. The other thing that's different about Apple, when IBM makes a donation, usually that donation is tied to a commitment to purchase. I doubt if you will see many donation decisions by IBM which is independent of a purchase decision. When Apple makes a donation, the donation is independent of the purchase decision. In fact, as the person in charge of the education business, I don't control the donation activities. Those activities are conducted by another part of Apple. There's an independent evaluation board, and they judge solicitations independent from any consideration from me. So we go out of our way to separate donation activities from traditional marketing activities. That is not done by IBM. So I think the real issue here is not does IBM have a stronger commitment to education than Apple? It does not. The real issue is that our partners must look below the surface, look at the long-term partnership that they've enjoyed with us, and look at what we have done and not just what we do when it comes to trying to sell computers in a particular moment.
I know in the Midwest, with our donation program there, we try to focus on activities that really make a difference and really enable customers and schools and students to make a difference. So we're going to continue to do that. John, back to you for a minute. You certainly whetted the appetite of the audience, I think, with some of the announcements you made with our planned entry of low-end Macintoshes during the 1990 and 1991 school years. You threw out a few bones, I think, and I was wondering if you could be a little more specific and talk to us a little bit more about the infamous low-cost color Macintosh. And I promise you that if you tell the 4,000 people out there, they'll all be quiet and promise not to tell anybody. Can you comment anymore?
Well, there have been a lot of companies that have ended up shooting themselves in the foot by talking about their new products before they were ready to ship them. But let me try to give you a perspective to look at Apple's new products in the Macintosh line. The most successful technology that we have at the high end is our Macintosh 2 platform. It gives a lot of modularity, a lot of ability to configure the system in the ways that the user wants. And we would like to bring those ideas further and further down into the product line. What we don't want to do, though, is we don't want to abandon the consistency of our software architecture, so that we know that the investment that people are making into Macintosh Pluses, SEs, other products that we have in our line today, that there ought to be a great consistency and confidence that when they buy those products, that the other Macintoshes that will be available in the future will be able to work effectively with them. That bridge is a seamless one as we look out into the future for other products that we'll be bringing into the Macintosh family. And these products will be available for the school year 1990-1991. I think that's important, that we're not just talking about visions out in the mid-1990s. We're talking about real stuff for the school year 1990-1991. So I think the key messages are every one of our Macintosh products will be able to run System 7 technology. We will be bringing lower-cost Macintoshes to the product line. We recognize the importance of color in K through 12, so that has been a top consideration for us.
Sure is.
And as I mentioned earlier in my remarks, we are working on a card that will give you no compromise Apple II emulation. Nobody else can do that.
I think a lot of people are looking for that card.
Inside of a future Macintosh. So the expandability that's possible with some of the future products we're looking at, I think, are going to be particularly exciting for those people who want to have, in effect, a universal platform of Apple II and Macintosh in the same box.
Well, for those of us who have had the opportunity, fortunately, to see the products, they're pretty exciting products, and I'm sure our customers will be excited in the coming months. I'd like to ask a question not from the field, question I've been thinking about. Over the past few years, I've seen tremendous changes in the education environment. And as we go into the 90s and approach a new millennium, what do you two gentlemen see as the single biggest challenges that educators are facing as they move forward? Bernie, why don't we start with you?
I think we're about to enter upon a very important period in American history. And in many ways, it's a return to the early stages of this country when it was recognized by the Founding Fathers that the most important asset that the United States had was its people. I think we're entering one of those periods where we understand that our national strength and our national character will not be determined by the depth of our military budget or by the number of enemies that we're able to count up. I think the wars that will be fought over the course of the next decade will be wars of intellect. It will be country versus country competing against each other on the marketplace battlefield rather than the war battlefield for competitive advantages. It will also be a period during which, as John indicated earlier, where a country's well-being will be determined by its capacity to extract from each of its citizens maximum intellectual development, maximum growth, maximum contribution. And frankly, Jim, I think that this is the most exciting period in American history to be involved in education. I feel so fortunate to be an educator because I feel like finally our time has come and we will be able to deliver a message to the American people, and for the first time in many years, I believe the American people will be listening to us. I believe that we will begin to see major investments made in education, but it won't be to support the status quo. Those educators who understand the importance of technology, understand the need for restructuring, and understand the challenges that are facing us, I think will be best positioned to take advantage of a new willingness on the part of the American people to invest in education.
Thanks, Bernie. John, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think 1989 will go down as one of the most important dates in history because it was the year in which we saw the real evidence of the crumbling of ideology and the shift towards power being defined in ideological terms to power being defined in economic terms. We haven't yet, I think, internalized what that means, defining power in economic terms. We know there's a global economy out there. We know that America has got to compete not only with industries within our own country, but with industries from other countries as well. And we know that the most valuable resource are the young minds of our kids. As Walt Disney said, the future of our country, is in our children. And I think we've got to recognize that at every level of the government and every level of society. What are the biggest barriers that we have? The biggest barriers, I believe, are that we have burdened on our schools the job of not only educating our young people for a different society, but we've also given them all of the other problems of how to deal with substance abuse, teenage pregnancy, disintegration of the family. And we've said, solve all of these problems. And yet we say, solve all of those problems, and we're not going to give you the same tools and resources that private enterprise would give to its people to solve problems in the business world. So I believe that what we've got to do is to refocus the attention towards the classroom, refocus the attention towards the teacher and the student, to recognize that we've got to give them the empowerment of technology tools and other support so that the teacher and the student can deal with the education issues in a very different way, and to pull away the bureaucracy of trying to deal with the hierarchy first and the teacher and the student last. If we can turn that around and focus on the classroom, I think we'll see real success in education reform in the 1990s.
Well, thank you. I think both of your comments are quite insightful and quite true. I wish we had more time to speak to all of your individual questions, but we know they come from the heart and they reflect a true compassion for the kids you teach and the system we're all trying to improve. Unfortunately, as live TV is, our allotted time on the network is coming to a close. But we wanted to leave you with some parting thoughts before we break to your local discussion period. First and foremost, we can't stress enough the value of our relationship with you as partners in making a meaningful difference in education. We depend on the synergy that results from the collaborative efforts of educators and technology builders. Innovation can come from no other source. Secondly, we are securing every available resource within Apple Computer to better support our most strategic market with the tools, technologies, and training programs that will reaffirm your choice of Apple technology as the platform for your future. Third, that your current investment in Apple technology, whether it's the Apple II or Macintosh family, is protected. That includes hardware migration and upgrades, software, communications, networking solutions, curriculum development, teacher productivity, and training tools. And finally, that we believe, as you do, that changing the world begins with education that is focused, innovative, and inspired. Only when individuals are empowered with the right tools can they contemplate making a meaningful difference in the century ahead. On behalf of John Scully, Bernie Gifford, and the entire Apple Computer family, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to join us this morning. Before we turn it back over to your local sites, we'd like to share a closing look at the people who personify the education vision for the 90s. That's great teachers. Thank you, and have a great day.
What do you say to Miss Girding, who taught your son to read and write? Or to Mrs. Teal, who gave your daughter confidence? What do you say to Mr. Greenberg, whose extra hours helped your teenager understand? Or to Mr. Curtis, who saw there was a problem and cared enough to help? You say thanks. Thanks for helping build our future.